Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Okay, here we are. Welcome back. We are going to check in with Kyle on his one thing from last week.
Yeah, so last week my one thing was to send an email to kind of kick off a conversation about our Reddit Taxi Global Challenge. And I sent this email the very next day after we talked about it.
Nice.
I was all excited. Sweet, our little one thing is going well, and I got an autoresponder from the email. So it wasn't quite as effective as I had hoped, but the conversation started.
Yep.
It's the first step, right?
Yep.
And that's the point.
That's the whole
So-
point. You just move a little bit. So
Yeah.
great.
Do you have an update on your 25 miles?
Of course, I rode 27 and a half.
Oh,
So,
Nice.
like you said, we were talking on the phone earlier this week. Had you not made the commitment to email Alen, you wouldn't have done it that day.
right.
You get busy, you're like, oh, I can do it tomorrow. Well,
Yep.
I'm the same way. Had I not committed out loud to riding 25 miles just during my work week, there were plenty of nights this week where I was like, no,
Yep.
I'm tired. I just want to eat dinner and relax. But at least 3 times I knew I had to get out on the bike. And
Yep.
I feel great doing it. Didn't interrupt anything. I didn't miss out on anything vital. I feel accomplished that I actually got my heart rate up and got the blood flowing. And of course, it continues to be great exercise for my legs. So I'm happy.
Is there a single time that you've ever regretted getting out there on your bike?
No, not at all. Like,
Me neither. So, Sean, yesterday I got a haircut for the first time in, 4 or 5 months.
thank goodness.
My hair, as you know, was getting a little insane, a little unruly. So I got a haircut. Okay, after my haircut, I go to my van, and I'm like about to get in the van, and I'm like, oh, I should because I'm super vain. I mean, you know me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I should post a selfie of my new hair to Instagram because I'm looking good, man. So I take a selfie, and the sun was like directly on me. So I look at the selfie, and I'm like, it could be better lighting. So I'm like, oh, there's a tree. I'll go over in the shade. And I go over there, and I end up posting this selfie from the sun. Anyway, whatever. I'm in the shade. And so I'm like going through Instagram, and it's nice out. So I'm sitting in the shade, and I'm like, oh, I'll just get a couple things done here on my phone, send a couple emails, whatever. I'm sitting in the shade, and it's nice out. And like I said, like 4
It's
times
probably
already.
Your first time going out in like 6 months or something.
Yeah, that's true too, is that it just felt good to
Sure.
be out, right? So I'm sitting there on my phone, and this lady comes up to me, this older lady. She has a white bag in her hand and a bottle of water in her other hand. She's like, hey, I'm from the church right down there. We just made a whole bunch of lunches to give out, and we have a bunch left over. So would you like one or a few? And I'm like, all right, so, yeah, sure, why not, right? Set them right there on the ground. Thank you. And she goes, so is someone coming to pick you up? And I'm like, no, that's my van right there. I was just, enjoying the shade real quick here. And she's like, okay, so how long have you, been in a wheelchair? And I'm like, oh, I have a progressive disease, do my whole spiel. And she's like, "Oh, all right. So can I pray for you? Or somebody in your family or something." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Yeah." I said, "My family lives in California, and you can pray for me or them, and everyone always needs prayers, right? They're doing great, but everyone always needs prayers." So, we're talking a little bit, and for some reason, she goes, "Can you use the computer?" And I say, "Yeah, I use it every day at work." And she goes, "Oh, wow, where do you work?" And I tell her at the Friedrichs Ataxia Research Alliance. And, so I go through this whole thing, and it's just clear to me that she was assuming she saw somebody in a wheelchair, and it was this poor, helpless person. I guess no fault to her, right? Like, that's how I saw myself, recognize myself as a disabled person. Like, I'm not blaming her, but her whole thing was, "Oh, but you poor thing." Not that she said that outwardly, right? And so I just wanted to recognize the assumptions that we make about people, because I noticed it, and I'm sure it's happened to you before too, right?
Yeah, I think there is so much in your story there that I would love to break down. But I think ultimately you're right.
Okay. Yeah.
How and I've done it myself. You have this preconceived notion of a thing, a
Right.
person, a situation, a brand, whatever it may be. And so you automatically have these assumptions about a result or a piece of it, right? And I think the more we actually talk about it, whether it's something we've done
Mm-hmm.
or that we notice is being, where it's being done toward us, I think the more we talk about it, the better we get at recognizing when we do things that are maybe unfair. Or, yeah, I
Yep.
think unfair is a fine way to put it. But I do think there's validity in just talking about it, right? Ultimately, I think we all
Yeah.
get better just simply talking about things.
I agree. Like I said, I'm not pissed or blaming this lady. This is really an opportunity for self-reflection,
Sure.
I think. I see something that she's doing that I also can admit that I've done before, and maybe it's not the best thing to
Yeah.
do, right?
It's
So,
probably not the fair thing to do. Yeah.
right.
So let's start from the beginning. So
Okay.
like you said, this lady walks up to you and in her head she maybe is thinking, poor helpless soul.
Right.
Do you think her questions are fair or inappropriate?
You know what? Her questions were inappropriate. And I think that it is more like her. It would have been welcome if she said, "Hey, how are you? I'm Deborah," whatever her
Sure.
name was, and "How's it going today? It's a beautiful day." Like, and just start a conversation, right? She's meeting somebody. But her approach was to be surprised when I told her that I was about to get in my van and go home. Like, somebody wasn't picking me up. There was no one, like, taking care of me because I can't take care of myself. Sure. And how much of this is what she's saying and how much of it is how I'm interpreting it, too, I guess, is part of the thing. So, yeah.
So it's it sounded like she approached you with the offering of a free meal, right? Like she has some leftovers.
Yeah.
Do you think she would have made such an offer if you were just sitting on the grass, no wheelchair in sight?
The way I interpret it, no. Is that the wheelchair was the thing that tipped her off that something might be like that this person might be a little more helpless than
Okay,
anyone
so
else.
from
And you can tell that I'm like starting to get a little like worked
yeah,
up about this,
so
right? So there's obviously some personal whatever in there.
totally, I'm with you on that, and I've got a story. It actually just took place this week as well. But I'll get back to that in a minute. So in my thinking, she approaches you and says, "Hey, what's going on? I'm down the street from the church. We made all these meals. Do you want one or some?" Like, to me, I don't know that I would think that approach is inappropriate, right? Later, her
Right.
questions get maybe off topic.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and then you're like, sure, why not? And then it's somebody coming to pick you up.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
in a sense, I think of that as maybe she's just seeing if you need a ride.
Yeah.
I've done that with probably younger people or even at work, right? Somebody gets out of class and then they're kind of standing at the front door for 20 minutes. I'm like, are you okay? Do you need a ride? Is your ride coming? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help make sure they get home. I don't necessarily think they're helpless. So
Right.
talk to me about that. Do you think she was just trying to help make sure you weren't stuck? Or do you think she
Well,
was trying to get into your business?
so Sean, there's an important admission that I need to make
Okay.
is that I was sitting in front of like a community center, and I think it's a center that serves underserved populations.
Okay.
And so maybe it's a spot where people sit or hang out that might need help, right?
Sure. Or given that context, her frame of mind is that if there's a stranger or a new person, a new face, they're only here because they need help.
Right,
Maybe.
right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I mean, so far, I think her approach is fair. I'm just saying
So
that's
far,
where I'm
lady 2, Kyle 0.
That's just my thinking. Okay. But then, like you said, she began to be surprised. Like, oh, you have a job? Oh, wait, you can drive?
Yeah.
Okay. So where would you say she crossed the line between just being a nice bystander to being inappropriate?
I think it's the surprise at the job thing. And, the other thing was I was about to go pick up my truck because it was at the bike shop. And she's like, "Oh, you ride a bike?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've ridden across country twice." Wow. Like, all right. Yeah, that I appreciate the enthusiasm, but so maybe it's not so much cross the line as my interpretation of it too. So
Yeah, I'm with you because I think there is at least for me, there's a struggle between identifying what's fair and what's inappropriate. Because part of me
right.
thinks it's fair and reasonable, and I think very important that people ask questions, right? That's part of
Yeah. Yep.
the process of learning and growing and expanding our thinking or our own perception of reality. So I do believe it's absolutely imperative that people ask questions. But then the other side of me is like, okay, am I thinking they need to ask certain questions? Does it matter what tone they ask the question in? Because
Yeah.
to me, the answer is yes. But then
Yeah, I think the tone is the most important.
I agree. Is it fair, though, for you and I to have, to want a certain set of questions and to want them in a certain format?
Yeah, I know.
And I'm just
That's
for the sake of conversation.
No, I think that's the ultimate question that we're asking ourselves here, right? And maybe that is unfair, but Also, I think it deserves a recognition from both sides that it's a little bit like, can you be aware of how awkward and potentially invasive and insulting you're being? Hopefully that's fair to a certain extent, and I think it's fair to talk about that stuff, as you said, right? And to voice it, because that's how we might be aware of what we're doing to others as well.
Yeah, and I think this conversation helps me be a little more relaxed if somebody comes at me with a certain question or a tone. Because ultimately, I think I know I have been unfair in my response, right? Somebody asks a question and I get mad right away. And you've said it 100 times, and it's even, I think, on the cover of your book, right? Life is about how we react. And is it fair for me to react aggressively? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just posing the question.
Well, so this reminds me of, we interviewed Roger Crawford, and he's an amazing tennis player, and he's missing a leg, and he doesn't have hands, but he's like a really good tennis player. And I asked him, Roger, how do you react when people say like, "Oh, I know a guy that doesn't have a hand. Do you know this guy?" Like he's supposed to know everyone who has the, whatever. And he's like, "You know how I react?" He's like, I give people a little slack. Just give them the benefit of the doubt. And maybe that's the general gist of what we should come away from this with, right?
Ultimately, I think that's where we want to be. At least I know I want to be there. I don't think there's an issue with being offended. I don't think that there's anything wrong with getting to a point where you're like, okay, this is inappropriate. But I know for me personally, I've in the past, and even sometimes not so distantly past, depending on a tone or a certain wording, I'm immediately on the defense. And I don't know that it's inappropriate for me, but I do feel like maybe I'm being unfair because maybe I don't know what's going on with that person for that day, or what their experiences have been, or why they have a certain perception that they have. Granted, it doesn't matter what they've been through or what I've been through, but maybe a part of what makes life easier and better for everybody is that we all give each other a little bit of grace and give ourselves a little bit of grace. And sure, maybe at some point you're like, okay, dude, you crossed the lines, Deborah. But I guess what I'm struggling with is, how do we get to that point where we do, like Roger says, give somebody some slack, but also at some point don't let them walk all over you, or don't let them continue living life with the perception that isn't fair.
Right, like, did she? Would the situation have been better off if I tried to like explain to her why I felt she was being offensive, or would that? I don't know.
Like, I wonder, would she have eventually become a better person, right?
Right.
Would she have grown from that experience?
Or would I have? Yeah.
Totally. And I think ultimately the answer is yes, at least your part, because we're having a conversation about it, right? So we're facing a part of reality we can't just ignore. You could just sweep it under the rug and never think about the conversation again. There's value in just talking about it, and hopefully we change a little bit or grow a little bit if we identify an area of doing so. I do want to throw it out because I believe that Roger Crawford interview was one of the best interviews we've done. Episode 17. So you gotta go way back, like 2 years.
Sean, I know that it's getting a little late in the episode, but you mentioned you have a story. I want to hear it.
Yeah, I do. This week, I had gone to, well, I'm in an apartment complex, and right now with COVID, most amenities are closed down. Well, the pool is open with restrictions, right? You gotta check in, give your ID. They limit the numbers. They limit space, and they close down every 2 hours to sanitize and blah blah blah. Anyway, I had gone to the pool, and I had dealt with the lady that I've never met before. She was a new face to me. You go to the front door, you can't go in. They come to you. You talk at the door, you exchange license and a pass, whatever. So then you walk around the building to get into the pool. So of course I gotta walk around to the gate. And I walk awkwardly with FA all by itself. But right now, of course, I walk even more awkwardly because I'm still recovering from the broken femur, right, months ago. As I'm rounding a corner and approaching her, literally, even though her mask is on, I can see the scowl in her forehead and her eyes. And she literally, in this tone, says, "Why are you walking like that?"
Oh.
And, of course, I'm immediately like, WTF? Like, who do you think you are? So I don't yell, but I stop. I lock my eyes with her, and I just say, "I'm disabled. Be careful with whatever comes out of your mouth next, lady."
Yeah.
And she, doesn't respond right away. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I thought it was cute. I wasn't, I thought maybe you were just walking cute for me or something."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
of course.
"Sure." And then I start walking because I can't get, I gotta stay still. I can't do two things at once. So then I'm like, okay, whatever. I start walking past her, and again, she's like, "I'm sorry, I wasn't sure." And I'm like, "It's fine." And she's like, "Have a good time," as I just walk by, and I'm like, "You too." So I'm at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be a complete jerk, but I don't want to let her get away with that tone, right? That's not, in my head, that's not a fair approach.
Right.
But then I lay there for an hour, hang out by myself, and I'm struggling with that whole conversation. I'm like, okay, a part of me wants people to ask questions, but the other part of me is like mad and angry and offended.
And wants to kick that lady in the shins, right?
So anyway, it was just an interesting wrestling within myself, because I want people to ask questions and I want to help educate the world around me. But I also felt offended and mad and angry in that moment. And I want to know if anybody can tell me where the middle ground is or how to find it.
Well, partly, Sean, knowing how I've seen your transformation in the last 3 years, and you even talked about it a little bit earlier, right? You used to just go off, right? I mean, there are, and I think you're in the middle ground where we both are, right? Where we're struggling with how to respond. And at the extreme ends are the bad responses, right? Totally shutting down or totally laying into somebody. And I think it's difficult. The middle ground is a tough place to be. And the fact that we're both struggling with it, I think, means that we're there in the middle ground trying to figure it out.
Maybe. Well, yeah, I would agree that we're still trying to figure it out. I would say, yeah, we're closer to the middle ground than we've ever been, right? Um, but I still, like me personally, I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
cause I replaying the conversation on, for my interaction, I wish I would have been able to say, well, I'm walking this way because I'm disabled. I love that you point that out or you ask a
Mm-hmm.
question, but I really don't think that was the appropriate approach. Had I been
Right.
able to calmly
Yep.
deliver such a statement, I could have answered her question, but then also challenged the way she approached the subject, right? And maybe that would have helped her realize, oh, okay, well, thank you, and I see your point. I won't do it that way again. Or, I'll rethink my process. And I think the same thing for you, right? What if when Deborah was like, oh, you can drive, or wait, you can work? What if you were able to say something like, well, yeah, I'm a fully functional adult. The chair doesn't limit
Right.
all of me, just
Yeah.
my legs. So, I appreciate the surprise. Why are you so
Yeah.
surprised?
Oh man.
And maybe we hash through that. Well, I just assumed you're in a chair, you can't do anything. And then you get, well, that's what's wrong with the world. And,
Right.
you
Right.
can talk to that. And she would have maybe walked away feeling small, but not necessarily um, less than. You know,
Right. Right.
small in the sense of, oh, I have more to learn. Not small in the sense of, I just got chewed out. Whereas my
Right.
lady, I know she walked away feeling probably really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish maybe I would have caused her to walk away feeling challenged and not
Right.
bad
Yep.
or not guilty.
Good call. Well, you know what I'm thinking, Sean, right now? And this is actually making me kind of excited. Like, maybe all of these things from here on out are our opportunity to try to do
Mm,
that, right? To try to do what you just said. And it's not going to be easy
totally.
and it's not going to happen all the time, but we should challenge each other to try
Yeah,
that and
for
report
sure.
back.
Because we both know we're going to keep getting questions. And we're going to keep
Yeah,
getting surprise responses. And, people
right.
are like, no way. That can't be. What? You ride a
Yeah.
bike? What? You should have been like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I wrote a book, and I travel the world, and I speak here and there, and I have a podcast. Like, why is that surprising? And then
Yeah.
maybe, just to be mean, you're like, oh, what do you do? Go to church. Make sandwiches for people.
Oh, by the
Cool.
way, this sandwich does not look very good at all.
Yeah, anyway, do you have mayo packets?
There was
Oh,
a mayo packet, and actually, I did take the lunch, and it was pretty good. There was a
okay.
little brownie in there and stuff, and
Well, I
so
think, it's a good thing to point out. Maybe, we're both trying to get better, and maybe she's trying as well.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe, for all we know, she spent her whole life afraid of interaction with strangers. So maybe in her world, it was a big accomplishment. She approached a stranger,
yep,
and maybe that's progress in her world. Who knows?
yeah, yeah. So, anyway,
Anyway,
yeah, we're solving the world's problems, man.
well, we're at least solving ours.
Yes.
You know what I would love to hear from our listeners? We know so many of our listeners live in the world of disability or rare disease, and I would love help. If there's a technique or an approach or a life lesson that you think might help any of us grow, we'd love for you to share it, whether that's through email or on our social media. Anything you can do to help us become better people.
Mm-hmm.
We're certainly at a point where we need to move on. As our listeners know, we started doing these one things, right? We all know that it's really easy to identify long-term goals, but then it's also really easy to not move toward them. So one of the things that Kyle and I are committed to doing is help hold each other accountable to each other and also to you, our listeners. So we've committed to throwing out at least one thing we're going to do each week to help us move towards our long-term objectives. So Kyle, what is your one thing that you're going to work on or do this week?
Well, my long-term goal is to buy a condo. And I've been working with a realtor that I really like, and we've put a couple offers in, and the seller went with a different offer, so we keep looking. I feel like I've been looking forever. It's been about a year and a half, I think. But, it just takes a constant effort. And so this week I am going to refocus with my realtor and just have a conversation and be like, all right, what do we need to do? What's the next step? Because my long-term goal is to buy a condo, and we need to do what we need to do right now to make that happen. So
sounds good. Question though, why do you say a condo over a house? Like, do you just have an interest in a condo? Is it because you feel it's temporary, or?
No, I don't want yard work. That's the main reason.
Yeah.
I owned a place in Sacramento for a few years, and it was like constant yard work, sure. I felt like, and that's just something I don't want.
Yep. Okay. Well, Kyle, my one thing is to get back on track with my weekly rhythm register, which I've adopted from the author Darren Hardy. That weekly rhythm register is really just a scorecard for what is important to me every day. And ever since my femur accident, I've not even tried to keep track. So that's what I'm going to do this week, is get back in that habit and start tracking my progress for what I believe to be important to me every single day. So the weekly rhythm register is my commitment this week. Of course, as everybody knows, we like to end with an expression of gratitude. My thank you note this week is going out to another organization that you and I have had the opportunity to work with here and there. We were able to do a virtual event for a company known as Ultragenics. And I just wanted to say thank you to them for taking a chance on us and allowing us to host a virtual conversation. So thank you, Ultragenics.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and we met some really great people doing that too. So that was great. So my thank you note goes out to my barber, who in this episode I mentioned that I got a haircut for the first time in like 4 months. And, I think he wished he probably had some sort of motorized like weed whacker or something, because he really had to get in there and take a lot of hair out. So anyway, I'm feeling good, and it set me up great for the week. So thank you, Omar.
Awesome. Well, again, we'd encourage our listeners to do the same thing, right? Express some gratitude. Call a friend. Write a note, say it out loud, write it in a journal, whatever is going to help you kind of recenter your mind and your attitude. So, Kyle, thank you again for an incredible conversation. Thank you for sharing your story about Deborah and everybody else connected.
Sean, thanks for a great conversation. It's going to be a good week coming up, and I'm looking forward to getting back on the horn with you next week and hashing it out. So thanks a lot. And to our listeners, until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.